Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. This episode we're going to be looking at rendering. If you haven't watched the last video where we looked at values and rendering and lighting, then I'd recommend watching that before this. Yeah, so let's get into it. I'm going to be rendering 3 different portraits if we get time, if we get around to all of them, and I'm going to be explaining the process. So one thing that's really important before rendering any subject is actually just analyzing the image. So let me just change the color of my brush. So when looking at this image, we can break things down into the lighting that you remember on the sphere. So we have like our base color, which is kind of going to be this color you see right here. So that's going to be our base. We've got that core shadow, if you remember, just going all along here, and that's that shadow in between the shadow side and the light side, and then you can see we've got this ambient orange like lighting here at the bottom side of the face, which is ambient occlusion. And then you might also say we've got ambient occlusion here in the shadow. And you also want to start looking at things like your hard edges and your soft edges. So you can see that line that I just put here and this line that I put here is they're quite hard edges, whereas the transition between this light side and the shadow side is actually a lot softer, and so that's going to determine how much you blend. And then final thing that I want to mention is small, medium, large. It's a design kind of rule when it comes to concept art, but it's still good to apply here, because you're going to be seeing smaller shapes, you're going to be seeing medium-sized shapes, and you're going to be seeing large shapes. So when you go about breaking down the image, what you want to do is you want to select the largest area and choose like the local color. So if we see our largest area, it's not actually going to be our shadow, it's going to be this bright kind of highlighted area here. And so actually the first color that we're going to select would be this color here, and then we can paint on the shadows afterwards. And what you want to do is you want to work from the largest area shape, work it down to a medium sized shape, work it down to a smaller shape, and then even amongst like the highlights and the shadows, you want to have that same kind of approach. Yeah, so taking all that into account, let's get into it. Let's get sketching. And if you get stuck when it comes to sketching, I'd recommend going back to the faces tutorial in the anatomy series. Because that will definitely help you when it comes to sketching. Rough line there, so I'm just choosing like a line where the eyes intersect. And if you want me to make like a episode on proportions and drawing accuracy, then I can do. Just put it in the comments. There you go. Okay, let's start. So I'm just gonna make this image just a bit bigger. We're gonna select the base color. So if you remember, working small, medium, large. So just looking at the base color, it's like in between reddish and an orange hue. So on the color wheel, I'm just going to find red and orange, find somewhere in between there. And then it's not super saturated, it's like a desaturated kind of color, more in the lighter half. So I'm going to pick here on the color wheel. In terms of brushes, you don't need all these brushes, you just need like a round brush, some sort of bristle or blending brush, and and an airbrush as well, and that's it. Yeah, so I'm creating a layer underneath, I'm putting the sketch to multiply, so I'll be able to see. Guess the eye could come a bit more forward, or the nose could be a bit bigger. 1 second. There you go. Okay. So just gonna take that color with the round brush and we're just gonna put it underneath. And it's important that your base color is relatively correct. Like, it probably won't always be 100% because you're eyeballing it. But it's important that it's close because the rest of your colors are gonna be based off the first color that you put down. So you can see we've got like our overall skin tone, and then we can put in like some hair. Feels like a darkish blue color. So I'm gonna go down here, gonna go to like a darkish purplish color, and I'm just gonna lay that in, and we'll see what it looks like. And this is gonna look funny at first because I'm just laying down big brush strokes. And then let me just grab this. Or one thing we could do, just put it underneath. Take the rubber. And rub out the stuff we don't need. Okay, there you go. Another thing you can always do, and I guess this is more like a hack, but for any color that you feel hasn't fully worked out and it's only slightly off, you can select a layer that you're painting on. So let's say it's the hair, go to hue, saturation and brightness, and you can actually just tweak it only slightly on like in terms of like brightness and in terms of hue. Or if you feel like it needs to be more saturated, you can bump up the saturation. Okay, so next step. What we're going to do is we're going to select the face layer. We're going to create a new layer above it. And then clipping mask. And so we're going to take like a shadow kind of tone and we're going to lay in the shadows now. And so you can see we've worked with the large shapes and now we're going to medium. So the shadow, well, select the skin tone and we're just going to shift it down a bit. And then we're going to just alter the hue ever so slightly to the red. And I'll try that and see how that looks. I feel like it needs to be darker. Now I feel like it needs to be more saturated. And so you can see it really is kind of like a trial and error sort of approach. Tiny bit more darker and saturated. Maybe let's go with that. And so now what you're going to do, one second. Oh, it's because my opacity. It's the opacity on the brush. But now what you're going to do once you've got your shadow tone, you're going to start blocking the shadow shapes in on your face. You can see like the whole neck is in shadow, so I'm just gonna block all that in on shadow. Lower rim of the chin is also in shadow, so I'm putting that in. And then you see this kind of line here, that's like the side of the skull that you're seeing just there. So that's more like an anatomy thing that shows up often in terms of lighting. And then what you can do is you can, if you need to alter any of the lines, you can just take the rubber and alter the lines ever so slightly like that. So that's our shadows. Now what we're going to be looking at is we're going to slowly start putting in some of these other colors we're seeing. So if you see like the ambient occlusion on the underside of the chin, where it's very orange or orangey yellow, we're going to put that in. So we're going to create a new layer just above that. Clipping mask. And we're going to go to like a saturated kind of orangish color, between orange and yellow. And I'm going to take the airbrush because it's quite a soft kind of look. You're just going to take the airbrush and you're going to lightly put that where you see the transition happening. I feel like it could be a bit more red instead. There you go. Anywhere where I don't, well, no, it's fine because we can blend it out. But we're just going to take that color and we're just going to put that in the areas that we see. And it's not just one color that we're going to put in, we're going to put in some more colors that we're seeing. So I've added some orange, now we're going to add like a reddish blush color. And this is to indicate the blood showing through the skin, where the skin is fairly thin. And so when you're making decisions, always try and explain why you're making the decision, and don't just throw in colors just because. So I'll put in some red in there. Okay. Now at this stage I would take my blending brush, either like a bristle brush or something that's got a bit of texture to it, and we're just gonna blend in some of those edges. There's like a soft edge. Oh, okay. That's a good point. Before you start blending, merge all those layers together. It will make a world of difference. Okay, so now that we've blended a few things out, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do some highlights now. So if you remember, we had highlights and then specular highlights, and we're gonna work in that kind of order. Put in our highlight color, so we're gonna select the skin tone, go a bit more closer to yellow and brighten the color up a bit more. Turn down the opacity because we're doing like a glaze to put this in. And we're just gonna glaze. Glaze the areas where it's a bit more lighter. You can see that's our highlights put in. I should have said this beforehand, but I recommend doing it on a separate layer. I've done it on the same layer, which is fine, but I recommend doing it on a separate layer in case you make any mistakes. And then you just take the blending brush and you blend. And then it depends, but especially when it kind of comes to like a female face, it's better when you can have a softer feel. Okay, so we've added our highlights now. And then finally, let's add our specular highlights. So these are going to be the areas where the most light is hitting. And these are kind of reserved for special areas of the face. So one area that you're going to find a specular highlight is the nose. You can see we've got like a highlight kind of coming down like this. Eyes are another area. So like in the eyelid above, you might find some specular highlight, and just on the lid below. So I'm just going to briefly put that in. And then can definitely see some more highlighted areas here. Here. And I'd kind of leave it at that. I think maybe you could do a tiny bit here as well. And then let's put the lips in. So you're just gonna go to like the reddish tone. Maybe lower, yeah. And we're gonna do an airbrush for the lips. Just get a shadow tone. That I can use. The inside of the lips, and then we'll just take that shadow tone, put it underneath. That pretty much sums up rendering. It's the same sort of thing for the rest of the hair. Let's just put that together. Let's go into the hair now. So if we were to go into the hair, what I would do is I would select a lighter tone, and if you remember small, medium, large, that's kind of how we're going to work this out. I would take the round brush, and instead of trying to be really specific, I would just block it on like that. So you see we're starting to get a highlight on the hair, and I can always fix it up later, and I would highlight that area as well, and I'd start selecting the areas of highlight. So now that we've got the areas of light, I'd take the hair base color, and we're actually just going to go darker. Create a new layer for this. Same thing again, we're not focusing on particular strands, we're just blocking stuff in. Same sort of concept on the top of the head. Okay, and then once you kind of get to this stage is when you can start thinking more about details. And so we can create another layer above that. And here is where we can start thinking about strands and breaking some of these patterns up. And the truth is, when it comes to doing this, it's kind of all about shape design. You don't want to, what do you call it, have stuff look even or too symmetrical, because that's going to ruin your shape design. And so you actually want to have some variation. So you can see I'm going to extend some of these highlights and add a bit of variation. And yeah, the ribbon, the colors aren't like, what do you call it, 100% accurate. But we're using the information that you see in the reference to inform the decisions that we're making. So I always recommend that actually, whenever you're painting anything, even if it's traditional art, think small, medium, large. And at this point we can start varying some of like the shapes that we're seeing. So in here there's not as much, but you could add some of like the brownish reddish tones that you're seeing. So you could take an airbrush and just start adding these brownish reddish tones. And I think it's because the hair is like a blackish brownish color, and so areas where the light is hitting more of, you might see more of that. And then even the highlight, if we take this highlight and I just go in here, just a tiny bit that indicates the middle of the hairline. I guess what you could do now is you could take your blending brush and you want to put all that hair together, and you can actually bring out some of those edges and blend. And in all honesty, you don't want to do too much, because most of the work has been done in those early stages when you're coming up with the shapes, and so you just want to blend in a way that enhances what you have. I might only do one actually, one portrait, just because I'm aware of time. There you go. So that's our hair, and it's kind of just a process of squinting down and adding what you see. And we could put the clothes in. Clothes, it's the same again, same process. Select a base color, so something muted and beige. So what I might do is I can brighten this up just a tad. And it doesn't have to be exactly as the reference. The reference is only there to help us inform what we're painting. And same again, we're gonna shift the hue, make this a bit darker, and we're gonna put in the shadows. And then same again, you just take the blending brush, you blend. And what we can do now is we can take the airbrush and add some of those extra colors that we see in. So you can take that like saturated yellowish color that we're seeing, and maybe we also want to paint in a shadow to create separation and contrast between where the skin is and the jumper is. Anything else? And then finally I would just emphasize more of this shadow. because it feels like it's getting lost. So on the skin, I'd create another clipping mask. And now I just want to lighten that up so it doesn't become oppressive. So I'm just emphasizing more of these shadows now. And you want to remember that actually you still need to try and maintain some of the stuff that you had underneath. So that orange light, I'm gonna take a soft brush and just allow some of that to seep in. And then finally, let's just paint the eyebrows and add some shadows to the ears, and we'll call it a day. And it's up to you how detailed you want to go with this. Because like you can keep on adding things, but there is kind of a certain point that you might want to stop. Yeah, so if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I think I'm gonna actually leave it here just for the sake of time. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any other topics or things you want me to make a video on, let me know.